the government is willing to strong arm social media companies to push a narrative, why the government would not also be willing to do the same thing to legacy media companies.
Because the Twitter files, even in all the leaks that they showed, they didn't strong arm anybody. I mean, like, if you want to pull up the screenshots, we absolutely can. Like, I've gone through them all on stream before. Like
So has my stream. We covered every release. I've read through all the screenshots myself. It's absurd to assert that there is no influence on the relationship via the power dynamic between the government and the company. And because of that, I believe you can take the government to social media example and extrapolate it to the legacy media example.
I mean, I just can't wrap my head around the idea that the media is beholden to the government, because the entire point of media in this company and the way that they kind of stay in relevance is by critiquing government or critiquing people in government. If you're MSNBC, you're going to be critiquing almost always the conservative side. If you're on Fox News, you're almost always going to be critiquing the liberal side.
How can you say with a straight face that the FBI contacting Facebook or Twitter and saying, hey, this was tweeted, delete it, or hey, this account is not nice for us, de-rank them? How can you say that's not strong arming a company to push a narrative?
There's a difference between like asking someone to do something and having the legal force to be able to do it, right?
Okay, if someone walks up to you and they're holding a gun and they look pissed and they say, hey there, I notice your wallet in your pocket right there. Kindly give it to me. Are you going to tell that person no?
Did the government ever threaten any kind of legal repercussion if they didn't delete a post?
Did you follow the Twitter files?
I did follow the Twitter files.
Okay, so explain to me why it is a leap to say that the government would do that with social media companies, but not some version of that with legacy media?
Because the Twitter files didn't make the claim that the government was giving them narratives to push.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm asking you for a logical argument as to why we would think, if the government is willing to strong arm social media companies to push a narrative, why the government would not also be willing to do the same thing to legacy media companies.
Because the Twitter files, even in all the leaks that they showed, they didn't strong arm anybody. I mean, like, if you want to pull up the screenshots, we absolutely can. Like, I've gone through them all on stream before.
So has my stream. We covered every release. I've read through all the screenshots myself. How can you fundamental disagreements, here we go.
Yeah.
How can you say with a straight face that the FBI contacting Facebook or Twitter and saying, hey, this was tweeted, delete it, or hey, this account is not nice for us, de-rank them? How can you say that's not strong arming a company to push a narrative?
There's a difference between like asking someone to do something and having the legal force to be able to do it, right?
Okay. If someone walks up to you and they're holding a gun and they look pissed and they say, hey there, I notice your wallet in your pocket right there. Kindly give it to me. Are you going to tell that person no?
Did the government ever threaten any kind of legal repercussion if they didn't delete a post?
Did the person in my analogy just threaten you?
Yes, they have a gun.
Okay, the government has a monopoly on violence.
Yeah, but just because they have a monopoly on violence doesn't mean that they're employing that. Whereas someone
But
having
the
a gun,
monopoly on violence is the gun in the metaphor. The government can do pretty much whatever the hell it wants to you if they really want to do it. They'll find a way to do it.
that's not necessarily true.
Fundamental
Oh,
disagreement.
I thought that you were a constitutionalist.
I am a constitutionalist. That doesn't mean the government follows it. I believe in the document as drafted. The government does not obey the document as drafted.
Except for all the times that they do.
Oh yeah, selective obedience is the same thing as absolute obedience.
Again, like we would have to like find an example of the government not adhering to the Constitution. Like
Every single gun law that exists.
Okay, that is a hyper big legal disagreement that we're gonna have there. All right,
cool.
That I don't want to like get into right this second because we're on the Twitter files, right? But like the idea that like no legislation whatsoever like can ever be passed, like, and even on that, I think that the strongest legal argument for the Second Amendment, the strongest legal argument for the Second Amendment being like in totality is only been argued since the 70s or something like that. Like nobody.
Yeah, because before that, it wasn't contested. It was just universally accepted and understood.
I mean, people weren't walking around with grenades all over the United States or anything like that.
That's not relevant to the argument.
It means that there were gun laws in the United States before that, and then a bunch of them got repealed after that I don't remember which Supreme Court decision it was, but a bunch of gun laws got repealed after that decision based off of that judicial review.
Okay, so is the point you're making that because gun laws were in place that were repealed by that judicial review, that is indicative that we did not have a unified cultural understanding of the Second Amendment?
I don't think that I said that. I think that we have like general societal ideas of what something means. So like in regards to the Second Amendment, I think that we probably did have a pretty universal idea that like, I don't think that most people thought it was weird that they couldn't own, MG42s and shit like that. Right. It wasn't like a super big, weird question like, oh, man, why can't I own an M1A1 Abrams tank, But like after that, I think it was the NRA, but I don't want to just like assume something. Right. But like that decision back in the 70s was the beginning of the gun culture as we have it today. Right. Because the gun culture pre that decision was much different than the gun culture that we have in the United States now. And let me be like ultra clear. I'm not anti Second Amendment, right? Like, I think it's fine if people want to own guns, but it's just, yeah. But like in regards to like what the point of this whole like segue or tangent that we've gone on, the government has limitations on its power. Right. It doesn't mean that they can't request something to happen. In regards to the Twitter files, like you can disagree that this is something that the government should do. Oh.
The fourth. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. You can make an argument that you don't think it's something that the government should do, but I don't think that there was any threat of legal force behind that. There was never any implication of any force that was going to be used behind that. And for the most part, the things that they were asking people to take down were like in regards to like, if we're going to go straight to the Twitter files, the pre the laptop story, like getting the story breaking on New York Post, like there were pictures of Hunter Biden's cock going around, right? And it was Trump's FBI, it was Trump's, intelligence agencies that were contacting these social media sites and saying, hey, this is basically revenge porn. Can you take this down? Right. Like in regards to the Twitter files themselves, the things that we saw, the screenshots that we saw, there was never any like, hey, you need to take this down or you're going to be violating section, 203.02.1612 of the U.S. legal code or anything like that. And we're going to come after you. There was never any like implied threat. And there are plenty of examples, even in the Twitter files, in the screenshots, where Twitter didn't comply with requests to take down accounts. They didn't comply with taking down certain tweets, right?
Occasionally, yeah, occasionally they did not comply.
So if they felt like they were being, held at gunpoint, right? Like, hey, nice post you got there. Be a shame if it stayed up, huh? Like, if they felt like that, then why were there some that they refused to take down, some accounts they refused to ban, refused to shadow ban, right? And some that they actually did go through and do it, right? You can see the internal conversations that they were having about whether this was a legitimate breach of TOS or something that they wanted to do.
Whether the how to say this, the internal rationale for whether or not they complied with the government's requests is immaterial as far as I'm concerned. Again, so two things. First of all,
wait, hold on. I want to ask you about that. Why is it immaterial? Like, if it was, I would have to agree with you. If they did comply with every single, request from the government, I would have to agree. Like, yeah, there does seem to be some sort of like impropriety here. It seems like the government is strong arming them. But like, if they're going to disagree sometimes, right, then it seems like they do have autonomy. They're not actually being forced to do this thing. How is that immaterial?
It's immaterial because it's not directly relevant to the point that I'm attempting to make.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood the point.
Okay, a million tangents. We were talking about the Twitter files.
Twitter files. We talked about the government strong arming. Nice wallet you got there, holding a gun. Limitations of government through the Constitution.
Right. Okay, so going back to my metaphor, let's throw that metaphor out and look at it a little bit differently. If you have a working relationship with someone and you've both agreed that this is the interest you're pushing, and there is an internal disagreement about the best way to move in pursuit of the agreed upon thing, it's immaterial whether or not one side always complies with the other side because there's an agreed upon objective. And the Twitter files demonstrated that there were virtually never instances where left-wing accounts were downvoted, downranked, shadow banned. There was virtually never instances where left-wing narratives and talking points were suppressed. There was virtually none of that, if I recall correctly. And when I say virtually only to give myself a little bit of buffer in case I'm misremembering. We did, however, see many right-wing accounts, many right-wing narratives, all get nuked. There was a consistent one-direction flow of what they were doing. And as you've repeatedly stated, this all happened in conversation between the company and the FBI. So, okay, so the FBI didn't strongman them. I don't like that the government was communicating with a private entity about what narratives should and shouldn't be pushed, regardless of whether or not there was threat of force, which, going back to my metaphor and the fact that the government has monopoly on violence, the threat of force is always there, just like a big 300-pound psychopathic male standing next to a 120-pound defenseless twig of a guy. The threat of violence is always there, even if they're on good terms. So it's just absurd to me that when what was your original point when we got onto the Twitter files?
The original point was we were talking about how news corporations, the big compilations of those, I would say that in terms of those compilations, like all of the ones that had the same narrative we're all from like the same company, the same like parent company,
Right. And then
right?
you were saying, that that was not demonstrative that something like Operation Markenberg was going on, and then I brought up Twitter and social media, and okay. So, yeah, to me, it is absurd to say that there is no element of coercion or influence via power dynamic coming from government to the company.
Oh, sorry,
It's
can you repeat that last one? Sorry, something in chat distracted me. Say it again.
okay. It's absurd to assert that there is no influence on the relationship via the power dynamic between the government and the company. And because of that, I believe you can take the government to social media example and extrapolate it to the legacy media example.
I mean, like I just can't like wrap my head around the idea that the media is beholden to the government, because the entire point of media in this company and the way that they kind of stay in relevance is by critiquing government or critiquing people in government. If you're MSNBC, you're going to be critiquing almost always the conservative side. If you're on Fox News, you're almost always going to be critiquing the liberal side. But like the idea that, you know, like Fox News could exist in an environment where Biden has total control over, you know, the Senate, the presidency, you know, have all of these apparatuses underneath him where he's telling people to spread a certain narrative, and there's all these counter narratives against him. Same thing with Trump. Like during his presidency, if he had all these different apparatus to go through and strong arm or implicitly strong arm all these media companies to stop spreading, you know, bullshit talking points against him, why weren't those used during his presidency? Like the idea that the government is trying to push us towards a certain narrative, like that flies in the face of the idea of polarization of society, right? If the government wanted to push a specific narrative, right, and was strong arming every company to make sure that only that narrative was being pushed, then why do we have like so many fundamental disagreements on like basic statements of fact or of basic statements of like what happened or different perceptions on the same set of facts? If the government was pushing a narrative, then I feel like we wouldn't have nearly as much lack of cohesion societally than we do.
That's a logical non sequitur.
Tell me how. The
So
logic train is,
yeah.
just so I'm like ultra clear that I'm
Okay,
not misspeaking, right? If government wanted to push a narrative, right, and they had the ability to push that narrative, the companies wouldn't be critiquing the government in multiple different ways and from multiple different angles, right? And if the companies were complying with these ideas, right? Let's assume that they are being controlled opposition to, you know, any outside narrative, then why do we have so much polarization in society if all of these different companies are complying with the government strong arming them implicitly or directly?
Ordering my thoughts.
Sure.
Okay. The question almost begs a certain answer. What the question that you're asking is implying is that well, if the government is pushing it, wouldn't that make it somewhat absolute? And no. First of all, we have to talk about intricate societal and cultural factors that will be converging and opposing in this entire information warfare that the informational war that we're talking about. Okay, just because the government is pushing a narrative, even if they have the ubiquitous help of every single media company, even if every single company was towing the exact same line, that does not mean that everyone in the country is going to believe it. And in fact, we know because of the nature of humanity and the individual variances in disposition and psychological makeup that some people, is usually the people labeled as conspiracy theorists and other people with highly disagreeable dispositions, they're going to assume the opposite of anything that the authoritative source says. So why is there so much divide in the political conversation, even if the government is pushing a narrative? Because it's been a ubiquitous push in one direction at a societal level for several decades now. Like certainly since Nixon, the country has been moving left at a societal level. Like just the general social fabric has been veering left wing. And that has predisposed a lot of people to that's not the right word I want. That's not the way I want to say that. It is hypersensitized a lot of people to what is going on in the culture, and they aren't buying the narrative anymore. People have become radicalized, and that is why your logic is wrong. Because especially if all of the power structures push a unified narrative, that will inherently cause a segment to break off and call bullshit.
So I don't think that I was making an argument that it would be like a universally held idea, right? I mean, we still do have the First Amendment. People are allowed to like speak their truth, right? And, I support that. God bless America. We don't have, hate speech laws. We don't have, stupid laws about, I don't think that we're ever going to have hate speech laws, but
I hope you're right.
Well, welcome. For people that are new, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Kick, I'm Sondsol. I am a political science student. I like to talk about politics. I like to argue about politics. We talk about all sorts of fun things on here like drama and politics. And I like to argue with people and chat about a lot of different things. Like, comment, and subscribe. I don't like to shill. Also,